Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Crum, Managing Partner of SKC & Co. CPAs, and we are here this morning for office hours. Thank you for joining us. My typical co-stars are with me as usual, our Marketing Director, Karen Donaway, and her Marketing Assistant, Brittany, who will be managing the chat. We are recording this session as we record all of our sessions, so please make sure that you check back and look at our website or send some of your friends and colleagues to our website if there's anything from today's presentation that you want to revisit or that you think will be beneficial to them. We are very, very excited because in conjunction with our launch of data analytics as a new service line to SKC, we are sharing this office hours with you to be extra informative and educational and give you some examples as to what data analytics can really do for your business. And we have two special guests today. We have Jeremy Clopton, a director at Upstream Academy, and we have SKC's very own Ryan Warnett, who is our in-house data analytics specialist. So gentlemen, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, and Jeremy, we'll start with you with a brief overview of Upstream as well.
I appreciate it, Sarah, and good morning, and thanks for having me. So my background is interesting. I'm not a computer science person. I'm not a data scientist by trade. I'm actually an accountant by training and a data geek by passion, and really spent my entire career living out that passion before I left public accounting. I was in public accounting for 12 years. While there, helped launch and lead a big data and analytics practice, as well as a digital forensics practice, and have spent most of my career really building on that and helping companies initially finding risk and fraud risk within their organizations using analytics, and then transition to more broad scale helping solve business problems. After public accounting, I left to start my own company, focused specifically on helping companies get the most out of data and technology, and then joined Upstream about a year later. I was recruited by them. And I've been with Upstream just over 2 years. We are focused in the accounting profession. So we work with great firms like SKC & Co., helping them become better performing firms across the board, and had the privilege of working with Sarah and her team on their data analytics. We run a boot camp that helps firms to launch analytics as a service. And I think I've worked with over 75 firms in the last 2 years in that regard. And absolutely love it. Everybody asks, do you miss accounting? And I say that I very much rather work with accountants than do the accounting. But truth be told, I don't know that I did that much accounting anyway, being in the analytics space. So Sarah, glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Terrific. Thank you, Jeremy. Ryan, share a little bit about yourself with the audience, please, and what sort of drew you into data analytics, because you were sort of the driving force behind SKC going in this direction.
Yeah, appreciate it, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan. I'm the technical specialist for our data analytics team. I'm the one that creates the reports, does all the behind the scenes work here. You know, I've always loved data, looking at relationships, finding trends, and really this is just a fun, creative way to do that, and it helps bring value to our clients. So that's what really drew me into this whole data analytics thing. And I'm just really excited to be here. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Great, thank you. So towards the end of the presentation, Ryan's going to do a screen share and give a few examples of things that he's done so far internally for us at SKC and for some of our clients already. So hopefully you're on a device that allows you to view those screen shares in a good sort of setup. So with that, as you know, if you've joined us on prior SKC office hours, we like this to be as interactive as possible. So please chat us questions or comments that you might have throughout the presentation. Karen and Brittany will monitor that. And we are going to throw some surveys up there midway through various points just to kind of keep you engaged and sort of take a pulse on where we are with our audience. We're going to cover primarily 3 areas today. What is data analytics and why is it important for your business? How can leveraging the data that you already have in your company help you solve your problems, increase efficiency, productivity, and revenue? And then Ryan's going to share some examples, as I said earlier. So with that, let's kick off with the survey that Brittany will put up for everybody, just to kind of get an idea of where everybody is. How many of you already on the call today are utilizing data analytics in some aspect of your business? Great. So what I'm seeing, and Brittany will share it shortly, The majority of people already are using some sort of data analytics in their business. So I'd love to hear some of your experiences throughout this morning's call, and sort of share some best practices if there's an opportunity for that. Terrific. So I guess the most important place to start really is, what is data analytics? And it's sort of as this catch-all umbrella term. And Jeremy, since SKC worked so closely with you and upstream in sort of preparing to launch data analytics, why don't we start with sort of what your take on data analytics is for the group?
Sarah, that's I think a great place to start. And I love to see those survey results. I've got to say, you go back 5-10 years and it would have been the exact opposite as to how many people were using analytics. So it's good to see that people are recognizing that they're doing that. When I think about the definition of analytics, to me, it's fairly straightforward. It's a process, for starters. It's the process that we use to analyze data when we're looking for trends, patterns, relationships, or anomalies. You're typically looking for one of those elements. As Ryan said, that's what makes it fun, is because you're looking for those trends, you're looking for those relationships you may not otherwise know about. That's, to me, the very base of what analytics is. And then it allows you to do so much more with it. Now, from a definition standpoint, there are 3 types of analytics that are thrown out most of the time. There's descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. And I don't want to geek out too much because, as you all know, I could go down that rabbit hole, but I want to hit those 3 real quick because I do think it sets a really important foundation for some of the other conversations that we'll have as we go throughout the hour. Descriptive analytics essentially tell us where we are or where we've been. It's kind of that historian type of view. So if anybody's heard these phrases and wondered, okay, exactly what are we talking about? Descriptive just tells us a story about where we are, where we've been. Now, predictive goes a step further, and it tries to tell us, given what we know about the past, here's what the future looks like. If we continue on the same trajectory, you could say a forecast, might be an example of a predictive analytics. Prescriptive is the one that I think everybody wants to get to, and prescriptive is, if you want to get here in the future, here's what you should do. The analytics are used to give a recommendation or give us some guidance. What I love about analytics is almost every company is already using it, or every individual is already using it. Accounting firms have used analytics for decades. We just didn't call it that. And we called it, just telling you where you've been, perhaps. But if you're using Excel to analyze data, there's a good chance you're at least doing some base level of analytics. What I find interesting is we interact with analytics on an everyday basis. If you get anything that's personalized marketing from a retail chain, for instance, that's very likely empowered by analytics. It's not like there's somebody there saying, okay, well, Jeremy says he likes this. Let me thumb through some files and figure out what he might want. There's technology behind it. There's analytics. And a lot of folks even use prescriptive analytics on an ongoing basis, or at least not an ongoing maybe, but an often basis. Anybody that plays fantasy sports, it's my favorite example for that. And you have an app that says, here's the person you should play for the football game this week in fantasy football, or this is the person you should bench. It's prescriptive analytics at its finest. And I say it's at its finest because you don't even know you're using analytics, because you're just using the app. So what it does is what Ryan said, it does everything behind the scenes, and then it provides you value, which at the end of the day is what we're looking for when we think about analytics in the context of our businesses, is how do we get the value out of the analytics and not necessarily have to perform the analytics ourselves in that, sometimes painstaking detail.
And I think your examples, Jeremy, are great ones. And it sort of kind of falls into line with what a lot of people might mistake as big data. It can only be used by big companies that have these complicated algorithms that work behind the scenes that we can't possibly understand. But that's certainly not the case. And of course, with our data analytics service line, we're committed to bringing this service down to the small businesses, right? So can you share some examples of how data analytics and these types of different predictive and forecasting and even the prescriptive can be beneficial to small businesses and what you've seen over the years of your practicing?
When it comes to small businesses, they have just as important data as a large business. And I love the fact that you brought up the phrase big data. Despite the fact that I led a big data practice, I hate the phrase big data, because what it does is it scares people away from doing anything more than it does actually be helpful. In small businesses, when I think about the big data concept, extreme size, diversity, and complexity, there's not a threshold for size, diversity, or complexity. It just means you have a bunch of data that you really have a tough time struggling with. So whether you call it big data or not, you have relevant data. To me, that's even more important in a small business. I don't necessarily need to know, can I analyze every single data point that I have in every level? What I need to figure out is, do I have the ability to analyze the data points that are important to me? So when it comes to a small business, some of the examples that I've seen, worked with a dental practice, single office dental practice. They were trying to figure out how do we use our data to run our practice better. And it's interesting, when I started working with them, they actually did dashboards already. And they had 5 or 6 dashboards in the office physically. They were whiteboards, and they had different colored expo markers sitting there. And every morning somebody would come in and shade in a little bit more of the pie chart. And that's what they were calling their dashboarding. It was a very reactive use of data. So for them, essentially one simple thing that we did, and one simple way that they got value out of analytics, is instead of each individual person maintaining a spreadsheet for a month and then giving it to an office administrator at the end of the month to compile together, which it took her about 8 hours to get everything put together and ready, we used analytics to say, okay, well, how do we capture that in an easier way? And without getting too software specific, it was something like a Google Docs for a spreadsheet. You just enter your data in there. It automatically compiles. It was connected to visualization software. In that case, it was Tableau. It could have been Power BI or any of those. And what it did is it gave them a dashboard every day, not a monthly dashboard. And it allowed them to see where they were every single day in the month, rather than getting to the end of the month and now having to react and say, what do we do? Our month didn't go the way that we thought it would. We wish we would have known 28 days prior. Right, so it allowed them to make more timely decisions. I've seen, and maybe it wasn't, I guess, per se a small business, a surgery center at a hospital. And they pulled their data together that they typically looked at on at least a week or 2 lag. They pulled it in and we just looked at it daily, so that now all of a sudden they had the ability to make staffing decisions on a daily basis based on a schedule, rather than having to react every single week. For a lot of small businesses, Sarah, one of the best applications of this is managing risk. A lot of organizations have purchasing cards. Now, this is probably biased a little bit in my regard, because I did spend 12 years in a forensics practice and I'm still a certified fraud examiner. Purchasing cards scare a lot of small business owners. For what it's worth, they scare a lot of large business owners as well, because they seem very, very high risk. I absolutely love purchasing cards, corporate credit cards, because the data comes from the bank. It's high value and it's easy to access and it's easy to analyze. You don't have to clean it up. You don't have to worry about inconsistencies. You can monitor that. And I've seen so many small businesses tap into the power of their credit card data to not only manage the risk around those cards, but to get a better picture of where they spend their money, and be able to go back and negotiate, say with a Home Depot or a hardware store, and say, hey, we spend a lot of money with you. Can we get an account with you so we get a bit of a discount? And it's really just cost mitigation, cost management, being able to get that better input. A lot of organizations, small businesses included, also try to pull in some marketing data into it. Who's visiting their website? A lot of the software companies that provide the web hosting, Google Analytics is so prevalent that's out there. And you can get that information to say, okay, who's coming to the website, who ultimately becomes a customer, and how do we use that to get better at what we do? How do we get better identifying customers' needs, customers' wants, customers' desires? You don't have to be a Fortune 500 company for that to work. You have to have a website for that to work and to be effective. And for small businesses, one thing that I'll say is, don't be intimidated by the software that's out there. Excel is not the best solution in the world. I will be the first to admit that. And if we have anybody in the IT space on here, you're probably glad that I said that, because I typically get pushback on the IT side when I say Excel is a solution. I'm not saying it's the best solution, but it's a whole lot better than nothing. And there are a lot of those things around productivity, around staffing, around cost management, revenue prediction, to see where you're at based on a scheduled, production, that Excel can get you a lot of traction right out of the gate, It's not going to be the best, the most efficient, but it's a whole lot better than nothing.
And you said a couple things in there that I wanted to sort of circle back to, because there is such a spectrum of, I'll call them deliverables, when it comes to using your data and getting a product as, the finished deliverable. You started sort of with dashboards, right? And talking about the value of having them in real time, as opposed to, 10 days after the month close or only at the month close. Those real-time daily dashboards are huge, because so often when we're talking with our clients or other business owners, we're hearing them making business decisions on their gut, right? Because they've done it for 10, 20, 30 years, and they've got a really good feel of certain things from an instinctual standpoint. But when you talk about having real numbers behind it and having real information, it changes, a lot of how the decisions you might be making or the decisions you should be making. The example that I have is a few weeks ago, I was with a client going through a year-end presentation. And we all know the year that we had, they were, at home for a good portion of the year. And the owners had an overall sense that the productivity was down. They just, that was their gut, that was their feeling. And of course, that's one of the metrics that we share with them over a 5-year period. And it turns out that they had the most productive year in the last 5 years based on the numbers. And so I turned to the room of owners, and they were sort of flabbergasted by the fact that that was what the numbers were showing, because instinctually, they just felt that it couldn't be that way because people were home, they couldn't monitor them the same way, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the eye-opening examples, using the numbers to sort of determine whether or not you're running on your gut in the right way or not. And so we are big proponents of the real-time dashboards for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said that I love, because Ryan actually did this internally for SKC, is a marketing analysis. And we did start with, Google Analytics on the website, and we kind of rolled that into our CRM and the different marketing campaigns that we run. Because of course, as business owners and as accountants, we like to know what our ROI is. So what's our return on investment? And if we're making, 5 different marketing campaigns, is one going to be a really heavy hitter versus another? So that's always so important for people to remember when we talk about data analytics as well, is that we're not just talking about what can we get off of your financial statement, right? There's many problems, and Ryan's going to show a lot of this in the examples he shows later. There's many problems that can be solved that have nothing to do with numbers coming off of your financial statement, because your data within your organization goes so much deeper than just your financial data or your bank accounts or your credit card statements. So it's really endless what we can do, and having conversations just to even understand the data that you have that may not be top of mind to you, really takes a different direction when we talk about what problems we can solve with the data that you do have. So we did have a question that was pre-submitted with registration that I want to touch on, because it sort of overlaps in the program and the small business space. A lot of business owners use QuickBooks Online. Are there any sort of customizable or pre-canned analytics that you can get from using QuickBooks Online? And again, that would be mostly financial, because that's what we're doing within QuickBooks Online.
Exactly. And I've used QuickBooks Online between public accounting and joining upstream. I used QuickBooks Online for my business. It was the simplest. It was a small business. It just made sense. And a lot of the analytics that you get there are they fall into that descriptive category. They tell you where you are, where you've been. They have a little bit of projections to them, maybe in the tax space, trying to help you predict project what your taxes will be, so you can get those estimates correctly. But by and large, the analytics in QuickBooks Online are more in that, here's where you've been. It's not a whole lot into the forecasting. They get a little bit there, but not much. And that's not a bad thing. I want to point that out. That's not a bad thing at all, because if you're doing nothing, understanding where you are and where you've been is a step in the right direction, because you can't figure out where you're going unless you can understand how you got there. That said, it is very limited to those historic financial analytics. And really, to get more, you've got to pair it up with something else. You've got to pair it up with some of the marketing data. You've got to pair it up with your operational data. You've got to pair it up maybe with behavioral data. I'm a huge proponent of looking at communications, looking at behaviors, whether it's email or it's visiting the website, doing, operational behaviors as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm an accountant and I love my numbers, and I love financial information, but everything else, the behaviors, the communications really give that financial information personality, and it helps you give the context as to what led to that. At the same time, your financial information gives your behaviors value. So as you really look to take your business to the next level using analytics, it's how do you pair the two together? How do you pair the traditional financial information, which again, if it's in the financial statements, it's by definition historical. It has happened in the past. That's how we recorded it. How do you pair that up with the behaviors that got you there so that now you can go to that predictive, which is, and if we continue this, here's where we're going to get. QuickBooks Online gives you the foundation, but then you've got to pair it with something else. And that's where the solutions like a Power BI or some other platform that's more powerful really come into play, where you can pull, disparate data sources from different systems that may not otherwise be linked and turn them into something meaningful and actionable.
Terrific. Good. Karen, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say something here. So many times in the marketing space, there are metrics that are available through all of our social media platforms and Constant Contact, all of it. There's nothing but metrics, but it wasn't meaningful until they are meaningful in and of themselves. But when Ryan took them and overlapped them, so to Jeremy's point, when we combined them and he put these metrics together and overlaid things, it became, exponentially more meaningful than just the metrics on their own. So just agree that, combining the two can really be very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I think, to Jeremy's point, we tend to defer to Excel. So if we don't know, or we can't imagine the data being exportable into Excel, we kind of wonder, how can we capture it to utilize it? But you're right, Karen, in your example, Ryan took the data from our website, the data from Constant Contact, the data from all of our social media platforms, and then our various different marketing campaigns and the dates that we, sent those out and started those. And all of that was sort of layered over into these different charts and things like that really provided a lot of valuable insight, not only an ROI, which is kind of the most basic one, but, in behaviorally, what can you in the marketing department do differently, tweak, improve, focus on based on those results?
Yeah. And Sarah, you mentioned a couple things there. It's so much more than the financial, right? It's the dates that things happened. It's who was involved. It's people, it's places, it's events, it's entities, it's timeline, and it's the dollars. And when you can lay all of that together, now you start to see how one impacts and really leads to the other. That's when you get the full understanding of how the business really operates. And the gut instinct is still important, right? So many business owners have done that. You still, maybe at the end of the day, you get to where the analytics don't give you a clear path forward. That's where the gut and the experience comes into play. It's not to discount that at all, but at the same time, we get a much more comprehensive picture when we can pull it all together and say, okay, well, let's really look at this and see where we're headed.
So I think it's a good time to throw up another survey, Brittany, just to kind of take a pulse of the audience of, do you guys have programs in place that provide measurable data for you? And we'll just give it a few seconds to pop up. The yes or no's are pretty easy to answer. So very similar to the first survey, when we had almost 75% to 80% who do actually have measurable data from the systems that they currently use. Terrific. So Jeremy, let's kind of move towards the other end of the spectrum. Again, we focused a little bit on the dashboards before, but let's talk about how we can really leverage the data that we have to solve our problems, to increase our efficiencies, to increase our productivity, to increase our revenue. For us at SKC, it's all about solving problems and having the ability that Ryan has to solve problems, leveraging the data that already exists in the business is for us is another tool in our toolbox, and we're so happy to do that. But in order to be able to successfully do that, you have to be able to get to the root of, what is your problem, right? And so we can decide how we're going to solve that and what data we're going to use. How do you address clients or business owners who feel that maybe certain problems or certain data that they have isn't actually measurable, at least at their first thought, when we talk about it? And again, moving away from the financial side, because everyone can clearly understand how that's measurable.
When it comes to that, and your focus in that question, Sarah, is absolutely key. And it's also the first step, and that's figuring out what's the problem. What problem are you trying to solve? And the framework that I recommend, I call it the SQ method. It's something that I put together before I joined Upstream. And it starts with a strategic question. Before you can figure out what data could be measurable, what data could help you, you've got to figure out what question you're even trying to answer. Do you have a well-defined problem, a well-defined question that is going to allow you to use technology? And I start with that, and I'm glad that you emphasized problems in your question, because so often it's, we have this data, we have this tool, what can we do with it? And the answer is anything you want, but that's not helpful. So we first have to figure out what's the question that we want to solve. And then the method itself is SQ to the power of an idea. So like any good accountant, I have an acronym, of course, thrown into here. So the SQ is your strategic question. And then you walk through a process. In order to answer this question, what are all the insights that I need to answer it? Essentially, what do I need to understand about all the different angles, all the different avenues that we could come around this question? What's everything in an ideal world that I would know and understand in order to answer that question? Not with regard to what data you already have or anything like that, but just truly, if you were going to answer the question effectively, what would you need to know? The D in idea is data. And that's step 3, not step 1. That's where so many business owners go wrong. And for that matter, so many analysts. I've done it myself before. Ryan, it's so fun to just grab the data and go and forget to do the question. So we get the question, we figure out, okay, well, ideally, I'd like to learn all of these things. Now the question is, in what data sources will I find that? Not what numeric data sources, what data sources? It could be, some of those data sources may be on paper. Some of those data sources could be email communications. It could be, I've seen some where it's survey responses. It's actually in tweets or in Facebook posts, depending on exactly where you're headed. But to get the insight that I need to effectively answer the question, where would I find all of that information? Where would I find all of that data, without regard to whether I have it and without regard for, is it numeric or not? The next step is the E in idea, and that's evaluate. And now we figure, okay, what evaluation methods can we use to extract the insights out of that data? Sometimes that's going to be analytics. Sometimes it's going to be visual. Sometimes it's going to require modeling. It might require some form of artificial intelligence down the way, depending on how really technical you want to get with it. But you've got to figure out, in order to get the insights that I need out of this data, how do I approach that? And then the A in idea is the most overlooked step in all of this, and that is the action, which means if I learn A, I will do B. If I learn C, I will do D. You want to plan for that. And that's where so often that goes wrong in trying to solve the problem, is we go analyze the data, we get all these results, and we never actually thought through, okay, well, if we learn that, what do we do with it? What that will help you do is a couple things. One, it's going to set you on the right path, starting with a problem rather than starting with the data and looking for problems to solve. You need to know what's your purpose. It also eliminates that myth and the fear of big data, because you're only focused on the data that's relevant to the question that you're trying to answer. And then what you do, Sarah, is you may get into that data and you may say, you know what? This is not numeric data. It's not a measure of anything. So how do I do that? Well, is there a way to take non-numeric data and turn it into a measure? One example is text data. You know, text data, and I've seen this used, I've done this in the past in tweets, for instance. And I know Twitter's a very popular forum at the moment for discussions, but you can look at that and say, okay, is this communication positive, 1, neutral, 0, negative, -1? Right? What is it on that spectrum of positive to negative? Neutral being in the middle. It could be, is there certain emotion, and was the emotional score? Is there evasiveness? Is there anxiety? Is there joy? Is there happiness, sadness, right? It's, you start to take something that isn't measurable and you figure out, okay, what could we measure within it? I think back to a project that I did that, and it was about the time of an academic scandal at a major university, and another university reached out and said, hey, we want to see if we have the same problems. I said, well, we don't really know how to do that because we do letter grades. And we're not really sure, do we have discriminatory grading, favoritism and grading, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, it's actually, we're looking at this and thinking, oh, it's not measurable, but an A is a 4 on a GPA scale, right? A B becomes a 3, a C becomes a 2. All of a sudden, letters become numbers, and now it's measurable. Oftentimes, that's what we have to do, is we have to look at that and say, okay, what does this mean? What value does it provide us? And now we give it that measurability. And then we get back to that place of, okay, well, we're comfortable with numbers. The other thing to keep in mind is there is a lot of software out there now that makes measuring the otherwise immeasurable so much easier. There are platforms you can drop emails in, any type of communication in, and it'll give you an emotional score. It'll give you sentiment score. It will do all of that for you. One of the nice things about communication data, text-based data, is historically it's been viewed as unstructured, which was the big challenge. But at the end of the day, there is a software system, there's a program somewhere that's reading that data, which means there is an underlying structure, even if it's hidden. Software has come so far in just the last 5 years, 10 years, that all of the data that was previously unanalyzable, if you'll allow me to make up that word, I guess, can now be used very easily. And in fact, and Ryan can probably speak to this better than I can, Power BI connects to so many data sources that you previously wouldn't have ever thought you could connect to. And it pulls those insights and value, and it's built in, which is, and it's not built in per se, it's not like push button simple, but when you understand the software and you know how to utilize that to create measurable data out of unmeasurable data, your ability to use it just goes up exponentially.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the best part of Power BI is that we could bring in data from multiple different sources, and kind of touching on what Karen mentioned with our marketing data, we could pull in those different data sources and compare them over a certain period, and we can compare them and show relationships where if we were looking at this data source on one screen and then flip to another one, we wouldn't be able to see those relationships as easily, which is a great advantage and a great way to really see what's exactly going on.
Absolutely. It's doing that deeper dive into the information that we have. Jeremy, I'm going to ask you to kind of walk us through the example. It's one of the ones that you shared when we were at the boot camp, only because it illustrates, I think, so well non-financial data. And I hope this triggers your memory when I say that it's the one about the parking garage. And do you remember this one?
Not offhand. Give me just a touch more. Sorry.
So it's okay. So I think this is impromptu, I know. It was the parking garage, and they wanted to know why their revenue was down, right? And I think they were in a college town, and you pulled data that had to do with town events, that had to do with the almanac and the weather. You remember it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what that is it's really designed. So it sounds like a financial question at its core, right? Why are our revenues down? But the problem is, if we look at the revenue, it doesn't tell us the why. It just simply tells us the revenue is down. Revenue is a result of a behavior. Revenue is a result of activities. So what we have to do is we have to look to non-traditional data sources, right? In a college town, the number of home games, for instance, especially if it's a D1 school, right? You get the number of home games, football games, basketball games. Now, all of a sudden, we start to understand, okay, well, when were those games? What did our revenue look like on each of those games compared to prior years? You start to pull in the weather data, right? Did we have better weather or worse weather than in prior years? On the weekends, is it raining and nobody can come, participate in the downtown, in the university area like they normally would, because they're staying home because the weather was bad this weekend. So that all of a sudden impacts it. Really, what that story is used to share is the fact that so often we focus on the result and we say, why did this result happen? And historically, what so many businesses have done, again, guilty as charged, I've done it in the past, and I've had to learn from that, is we simply look back at the trends of the result and we say, well, it's going down, and it appears this might be why. But we never actually go to the process. So we go back to that method that I gave, that framework that I gave. The question is, why did revenue go down? Well, the first thing that I need to understand is, over the course of a year for this parking garage, what are all of the various elements that contribute to revenue? Is it classes? Is it events? Is it university events in a college town? Is it other events that came through? Do we have a touring company that came through and brought, Hamilton to the local university, and, everybody was parking in the parking garage because it sold out every night for 5 weeks, whatever the case may be? What was the weather like? What are the various elements that contribute to the behavior or the process of generating that revenue? And it's so important that now we can understand, okay, well, here are the factors that contribute to the revenue. Where do the data sources come from? Right? The Almanac has historic data on weather for, I don't even know how far back, and it's all publicly available. You can go download that. It's an easy file. It's not one that requires a lot of finagling. It's typically in a table. We're accountants. We like data tables. It works really nicely. It takes us to Excel, our happy place, as I like to think about it. Right. And we can analyze that very easily. And then, as Ryan's mentioned, now we overlay that. And as Karen mentioned, we overlay that. We overlay the weather for the whole year. We overlay the calendar of events for the whole year. We overlay the other events that might have happened during the year, or significant events that may have taken place in the city during the year. And then we overlay the result. And now we look for the correlations. What looks like it contributed? And there are instances, we have to keep in mind, correlation and causation are different, but it helps us understand maybe how the process worked. We can't necessarily say this did cause it without some further study, but it allows us to get on the right track.
Great, thank you. I love that example. So before we move into Ryan doing some of his examples, let's throw up our last survey, which is, what area of your business could you see data analytics benefiting you? And we gave you a couple of options there to choose from. This might be my favorite survey question.
Mm-hmm. It's a good one.
Okay, Brittany, if you want to share that. So the majority of people are interested on the operations side of things, and then coming in second is marketing. So there we go. That's interesting data, and certainly there's many other areas. I noticed no one picked other because they probably didn't know which that was. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who, like I said earlier, is going to do a screen share with some of the sample projects he's done, again, internally for SKC and some for our clients as well. And in theme with what we've been talking about so far this morning, we started all of these projects talking internally or talking with our clients about the problems. And we got very granular into what is it we're trying to solve for. And that's really where Ryan went and then gathered the data that was really going to speak to what we wanted the solution to be. So Ryan, I will turn it over to you for your segment of the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. So really our goal when creating these is to find our problem. What do we want to solve for? But really we want to create a story of what really happened so we could drill down into different areas and really find the solutions to those problems. So I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if everyone could see that. Perfect. So our first one, we're going to go into an inventory analysis. So really any company that has inventory really has to have a good sense of what they have, what's selling, and what's coming down the pipeline. This client had a problem with not having enough inventory on hand in certain months. So as you can see here, I have our top 10 products by revenue, by quantity sold, and by gross profit percentage. We also have revenue by month down here, and then our quantity sold by month here. We have our open balance from our sales orders in dollars in this larger number, and then our open sales order in quantity with our quantity on hand here to really show, okay, do we have enough of this product at the moment? Can we fulfill our orders? One of the best parts about Power BI is that we can integrate and interact with our data. So we see that June was our best month for the year. So if we click on June, we could see that the data changes. We could see what did we sell the most of in June, what created the most revenue, and what was the most profitable products. And we could do that for any month of the year and really get a sense of what's selling and when. We could also...
Ryan, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Because this is, I get to geek out on the fun part when you show me the deliverables. And for me, the fact that it's real time and interactive is what takes it to the next level, right? We're not providing a static PDF report. We're giving you something that is, I'll make up the word clickable, that is clickable, and you can drill down because there are those layers that we talked about earlier of data and information that interact together. This allows us to drill down in this example, like Ryan said, by product. And that's really where I think the differentiator comes across of really being able to use it to solve problems day to day.
Absolutely, Sarah. Totally agree. We could click on each individual product and everything will change, and we could see, okay, this product was a big hit in May and November, but not really much in the winter months here. So we could get a sense of when we need to restock on this product, when do we need to have a high level of inventory for what months and what time of the year. We could also see, okay, we have this amount coming down the pipeline, and it looks like we are indeed okay with what we have on hand. So this is just one example of what we can do. I'll bring it to the next example where we have, start with this one. This is a project manager utilization. This could be used for any clients who work on projects, have certain people running different projects. We could show the performance of each person, of each job, really get a good sense of who's doing the best, who's doing the worst, and why is that. Really the most important thing to ask is why is the data showing what it's showing? And we want to be able to use the data to create that story. As you can see, we could filter this by year, and we could see, okay, who's performing the best, who's performing the worst for each year. We could also drill down into each individual and get their statistics.
The thing I love about this one too is if you look at, I'll call it the profit percentage half moon on the left-hand side, Ryan went and took industry data. And so that 2% target that you see on that, to me, it looks like a gold line. That's actually the industry average that we're trying to set as a goal for this client organization wide. And of course, as Ryan clicks on each project manager, it fluctuates that bar as to where that individual is, but it allows you also to see firm-wide how you're doing compared to a target or a metric that you may have previously set for yourself.
Yep, exactly. We could also look at our different clients, and we could use the same data here, or the same project managers here, and go further into the project managers to see, okay, what clients were they working on? What types of jobs, which jobs specifically, and where did they make the most money? Where did they lose their money? Or we could look at it in terms of different clients. Like, okay, client 2 provided us the most revenue, but it looks like we had a net loss from their jobs. Is it worth trying to get those jobs in the future? We could see that, okay, they were not very profitable in 2017, but it looks like their profit percentage was increasing in 2018. Why was that? Were we just taking jobs at a lower bid because we wanted to get those clients in the door because we knew that we were going to generate a lot of profit from them? Really just use this as a way to create the story and really get a good understanding of what's going on.
Ryan, if I could add in real quick 2 things. One, I love the fact you keep talking about the story with the data, because to drive action, you've got to tell the story. Story is what people connect with, and it drives action. And this example here, as you said, and you alluded to it when you mentioned the future, it's great because it shows you where you've been, but it also tells you what you need to go look at to figure out how to be more successful in the future, right? You can see, okay, which project managers have the worst net profit, and maybe we need to look at those and figure, okay, is it what they do as a project manager, or is it the clients that they were dealt? And at the same time, you can look at those that are the most profitable and say, okay, what are they doing that's different? And now that's a way to, as you said, for the future, it becomes more prescriptive. If we want to really have higher profit percentages, we take the best practices and go forward, and let's cut out on some of these other worst practices that are leading to lower profitability.
Exactly. Like we could learn from the people who are the most profitable. Maybe they could do training for the people that are less profitable, and so on. Great points, Jeremy. Our next example that we're going to be going over is a simple salesperson analysis. This could be used with really any kind of data. This is mostly to show that Power BI can really drill down into more specific areas. We have just a simple sales by quarter graph here based on the persons, but we could click into one specific person and lead us to a completely new page, or we could show more specific data and really drill into our different areas of our business. As you can see, we have a couple different graphs here. We could show it by quarter, look at the different quarters. Are we meeting our KPIs? We could look at different person. Okay, it looks like they're meeting their KPIs. They're under budget. Just another way we could interact with our different kinds of reports, how we could set them up.
I mean, that's a great example because it's salespeople, Ryan, when you talk about whether you have monthly or quarterly sales team meetings. I mean, this is real information you can be sharing with your whole team from, an accountability standpoint and a measurability standpoint to really drive the operations and the sales side of your organization, if that's how you're set up, with salespeople like that.
Yeah, exactly. This next example is for any client that would be in the service industry that has their employees enter in their time. This is an analysis of billable and non-billable time. Really, as a service industry company, you would want to, maximize your billable time. You want your employees to be making the company money more than they're not. But for this, is great because we could drill into each individual person, see how they're doing. We could really get a good sense of what they're putting their time to. Are they meeting their targets? We have our 2020 target, and then we could compare our 2020 data with our 2021 targets. So we could see, okay, are they meeting their goals? Do we have to change something with the way that they are using their time? Do they need to be more productive? Are their goals realistic? Should we have a meeting with them to see if they have the availability to be more productive. Do they really need to use all the hours that they're using for non-billable time? Really use this type of data to drive action, to drive goals. Another cool thing with this is that these non-billable times, they are, like, as you can see, there's 3 general categories, but you could also drill down and to get into more specific categories. Like this operations has multiple categories within it. And then we could also show data point as a table, and we could see what exactly was put in for each data point. So we could really drill down into the most detail possible if we wanted to really get a good sense of where people are putting their time, and what we can possibly change to become more efficient as a company.
And Ryan, let me add to that. So Sarah, you asked earlier about the non-measurable items. Now, when I look at something like this, and person 12 jumps out, they have significantly higher hours, right, than everybody else on that. If that person is struggling with employee engagement levels, if they're struggling with burnout, this can also be a really good indicator of some of the other issues that aren't traditionally considered measurable, but that are impacted by measurable activities. So this is something, you go into that operations, Ryan, I loved that example where you got into the details of each type of operations, where they were putting their time. If they don't have very much PTO, but they've got a lot of non-billable time, and the descriptions are getting shorter and shorter every week or every day. Now, all of a sudden we have questions. Okay, do we have burnout? Do we have employee engagement issues? Do we need to, do we have a retention risk, which takes this to beyond just the productivity and efficiency, and addressing some of those things that are traditionally considered not measurable?
Yeah, exactly. And these are just broad examples, and really we could create something similar to this to really focus in and drill down on what our actual problem is and what we need to try to solve for.
And that's the beauty of all these, right, Ryan? I mean, it's not like these are the canned reports that you get. I mean, you customized all of these based on what the problem was, what the available data was, what the origin of that data was. And each time you do it, it becomes exactly what each individual client needs and is looking for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And they could be used for different problems as well. There's a possibility that we'll see something that we might not have thought of within the data. And it could cause a red flag and be like, oh, I never realized that this person was spending so much time on this. Maybe we need to change the way that they're doing this process, because it really shouldn't be taking that long, or something along those lines. Our last example that I'm going to go over is a different type of way to utilize data analytics. This report is usually extracted from a software, put into an Excel, manually put in. It's something that would take hours every week for an employee to create. And within Power BI, we're able to extract the data directly from the software. So really, all we have to do is change the dates that we want to be able to see, and the data will change according to those dates, so that we don't have to spend hours every week typing in manually. We don't have the risk of human error when they're typing stuff in manually. This is just the way that we can automate processes to make a company more efficient in general.
Great, terrific. Lots of different examples there, Ryan. Thank you so much. We are coming up on the top of the hour, so I'll open it to Jeremy and Ryan if you guys have any final thoughts or words before we close out for today.
I do actually want to show one more thing with Power BI, is the fact that you could use Power BI on any mobile device. So I could bring up any of the reports that I just had on my phone, I don't know how easy that is to see.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
But so it's just another convenient way that, if we had a dashboard that we updated every day, you could have it really wherever you are, as long as you have internet, really.
Real data at our fingertips, huh?
Exactly.
Very nice. Sarah, I'll just leave with a quote, maybe two thoughts. My favorite quote when it comes to data, and I shared this in our boot camp, so I know you all have heard it, is that the data is neutral. It's the people using it who have an agenda. And I say that for this reason. There are a lot of truths within the data, and how we use those truths is really important. We have to be aware, going back to the gut instinct, we have to be aware of confirmation bias, that we're just looking for the data sets that support what we want them to support, and be objective and evaluate what the data truly says. Because there's a lot of different things. The data it's all about how you use it. That's, we have to be cautious in how we use the data in that regard. And then my last thought is this, and it's simply, don't be afraid to start. Every small business, medium-sized business, large business, one person to Fortune 10, it really doesn't matter. Everyone has data. Everyone has access to at least some technology. And if you don't have the technology, you have access to great advisors. Get started. Do something to use analytics to improve your business today, is what I would encourage you to do. Sarah, thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy, so very much. And Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. Anybody on the call who has any additional questions or wants to learn more, please feel free to contact us. Brittany has put our information in the chat. We also have the new service line on our website, so you can check out some more information there as well. Again, thank you, Jeremy and Ryan. Audience members, if there's any other information that you want to hear on SKC office hours going forward, please don't hesitate to reach out to Karen or Brittany and share some ideas for future office hour events. We're happy to incorporate your needs into this. That's what this is all about. So again, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Friday and a terrific weekend, and we'll see you next time.